What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. Hey, Jason, I love your show, and you've really educated me on the schematics of basketball. I was wondering how come when people talk about the 2000s, they say it was Kobe's era, and that he was the undeniable best player during the era. I believe Tim Duncan was just as good, if not better, and deserves more respect as the best player in the 2000s. I believe people should look at this era like they look at the 80s with Magic and Bird, two all-time great players who dominated the decade. I would love to get your opinion on this, please, and thank you. First of all, thank you for supporting the show and for the kind words. So I look at it more like, 2000 to 2002 as like the Shaq dominant stretch, and then like 2003 to 2007 as like the Duncan dominant stretch, and then I look at 08 to 2010 as like the Kobe dominant stretch. But I think all three of them had really dominant stretches during that run. But that was definitely a golden era of the NBA just in terms of the top end talent that they had in the league. Next question. Wouldn't Steph winning 4 championships against the second greatest player of all time, LeBron, make it that much more impressive than Jokic winning against a banged up Tyler Herro-less 8th seed? So this is a great example of kind of like shaping the narrative. Steph won 2 of those titles against LeBron with Kevin Durant on his team. Like you're taking the 3 best players in the league. LeBron, the best player in my opinion. Steph and KD, the second and third best player on the team, they together beat LeBron, while also having Klay Thompson, who is the second best shooter of all time and a excellent perimeter defender, Andre Iguodala, who is the best wing defender in the league at that time, and Draymond Green, who is the best defensive player of his era, right? Like that mid 2010 stretch, he was the best defensive player. So I mean, I'm not, all championships are championships, to be clear. But all you have to do is ask an NBA player, and they'll tell you which NBA championship meant more to them. LeBron will tell you 2016 meant more to him, right, than maybe 2020 did, right? Like, so that's the thing, is like all championships are championships, but not all championships are the same. And that doesn't discredit Steph. It's just, I think it's really unfair framing to just be like, Steph beat LeBron 4 times in his era. It's like, yeah, but he had the help of the other guy that was on his tier in Kevin Durant, right? And had the most talented roster in the league. The most talented roster in NBA history in the 2017-2018 era. That's not a shot at Steph. I just think turning that against LeBron, I think, is particularly unfair. And then also, like, just mentioning Tyler Herro-less for the NBA Finals, he ripped through KD and Devin Booker, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and Jimmy and Bam. And like, whatever you want to say about the Heat, Jimmy and Bam are literally like one of the very best playoff duos in the league. So they took 3 legitimate dominant duos and just ripped through them without an issue. And I think undercutting that is silly. Next question. All of the Bucks players other than Dame and Giannis are in the bottom 10 to 15-ish percentile or lower in rim attempts, meaning no one other than them touches the paint much. I think this makes them easier to guard, and despite them trending in a good direction, I don't think they can peak. Their peak can contend with Boston, but I really love the show and wanted to know your thoughts. So, Milwaukee's been playing a lot better, but they've been playing a weak schedule over the course of their last 4 games. They played the injured Sixers, and then they played the Hornets twice, and then they played the Bulls. So they're heading into a really tough part of their schedule now, and we're going to be covering them very closely. I want to kind of withhold my take there until I see them against some of these really good teams in the next week or 2, just so we can get a better feel of where their defensive progress is. Next question. This one was funny. I actually enjoyed this. I know you cover only the top half of the league that's worth covering, but can you provide a quick minute thought on what Chicago's lineup of Vooch at the 4 and Drummond at the 5 would look like? Kind of akin to Minnie's lineup of Gobert and Towns. Chicago, a play-in team, so technically you're obligated to talk about them the same way as the Lakers and the Warriors. I thought that was funny. I shouldn't say what it looks like. They roll it out against Cleveland or whenever a team has a couple of bigs, but why not just adopt that philosophy entirely to see how it works down the stretch, stop playing the opponent, and just roll out the 2 towers and work around them? So first of all, I pulled the numbers just for fun. Vucevic and Drummond have played 310 possessions together. They have a 119 offensive rating, which is very good, but they have a 121 defensive rating. And that to me is the big difference between the Gobert, like a Drummond Vucevic versus a Gobert Towns lineup. Like Drummond is a really interesting player in the sense that, like, if you catch him on the right night, he can be particularly dominant. I know this just because I covered him when he was with the Lakers very closely. But there's a difference in foot speed between those two duos. Rudy Gobert is just so far and away better defensively than either of those Chicago guys. I think what makes the two big lineup work there for Minnesota is, one, Cat's a great shooter, but so is Vooch. And Rudy Gobert is just this like transcendently great defensive player that can switch and can drop and he can cover all this ground. To me, it's just fundamentally different because of Rudy Gobert, and the lack of foot speed I think has been clear in those lineups. 310 possessions is not a non-existent sample size. It's a pretty decent sample size, and they've just gotten run over on defense in that group. Next question. You said a team has to have the guy to win the title. Who was the guy at San Antonio in 2014 and Golden State in 2015? Golden State in 2015 is Steph. Don't let the Finals MVP narrative fool you. He was very clearly the Finals MVP in 2015. It's one of the biggest travesties in NBA history. Andre Iguodala got to guard LeBron with like 17 help defenders behind him because everyone else on that Cavs team was severely limited offensively, or at least other than J.R. Smith. And he was able to limit his efficiency. And then the Cavs started blitzing Steph Curry late in that series, which was leading to Draymond Green short rolls, which was leading to Andre Iguodala corner threes and cuts, which is where he got all of his scoring from. So, like, I think the 2015 NBA Finals MVP was a textbook example of like a good chunk of NBA media not really knowing what they're watching when they're watching basketball games. Next question. What is your opinion of the in-season tournament, given how poorly the Lakers have been doing ever since winning it? Any improvements you would recommend? Couple things. Jared Vanderbilt is completely and utterly indispensable to the Lakers. He's their only starting caliber perimeter defender. So, like, without him, they look like shit. And despite all of that, the Lakers have been pretty solid since January 7th. So like, I do think the Lakers are better than their record looks, and I do think their in-season tournament win was legitimate. It's just without Jared Vanderbilt, they just can't ever compete defensively the way that they did during that in-season tournament stretch. That does not mean that I think they're a top-tier contender or anything like that, but I do think their win in the tournament was an indicator of them being a really good team at that time, which was the best version of this particular Lakers team. Like a dominant physical presence of LeBron James and Anthony Davis, but they also were a really good defense during that time because of Jared Vanderbilt. Improvements for the in-season tournament? I don't know. It's a good question. I'd have to think more about it. I would say that, like, I could do without the obnoxious red court. I'm not even anti-painted courts, but the red was a little much. Also, like, I think that you could probably push it to an even bigger field, like maybe play for seeding and then have 16 teams maybe, just because the single elimination format was so much fun. But here's the thing. I think they'll tinker with it. I think they'll tinker with different times of the season too. But overall, I was really happy with it. Next question. Dude, on a separate note, I hate to break it to you, but when your body starts to fail you and slow down, you won't have time to play guitar. At that point in your life, you will most likely be spending your time as a fan, traveling all over the place, watching your kids' sports activities. I loved this comment. For those of you guys who didn't get the backstory, I did say in our last mailbag that when my body finally fails me, that's when I'm going to devote more time to playing guitar, because right now I just only do it for a few hours a week. Here's the thing. Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. I'm probably going to end up just going around to all my kids' sports activities. But let me just pretend like I'm going to try to still have hobbies when I get there. Let me at least just go into it with an optimistic attitude and see if maybe I get lucky. You made the argument that Jokic may have a higher peak than Steph, but he has a ton of ground to gain before he can be in the same conversation as him all time. Wouldn't that be the same argument for LeBron and Jordan? Jordan had the highest peak, 6 chips in 8 years, but LeBron clearly has had the better career in totality. Thanks and love the show. Thanks again for supporting the show. This is what makes the GOAT argument so silly. Everyone's criteria is different. If you lean towards dominance, it's obviously MJ. Like, here's the advantage of longevity. Like, so much of this is outside of your control, right? Like LeBron getting drafted into a bad franchise, like the Cleveland Cavaliers, who were poorly run at the time, right? Or Dwayne Wade's rapid decline after he went to Miami, right? Or like Anthony Davis's injury availability, Kyrie Irving and his demanding of a trade in 2018. Hell, Kevin Durant deciding to go to the Warriors. All these different things are different variables in LeBron's career, right? So like variables are variables. So the longevity case is If I get 21 years of all NBA caliber play consecutively in a vacuum, do I have more chances to win a title than, say, Jordan, who did less over less time, right? That would be where it gets complicated. My thing is that's really difficult to quantify, whereas trophies are very easy to quantify. There's trophies. One's got 6, one's got 4. That's not the end of the day, or end of the argument, but that's why I lean slightly more towards the dominant side than I do the longevity side. I still factor in the longevity. I think LeBron's longevity has made it razor thin. And like, who knows, maybe when I look back at this 5 years from now, I might feel differently than I feel now. But right now, I still feel like Jordan, to me, is the greatest basketball player that has ever played. And LeBron is just a very, very close second. That's just where I feel right now. You know, I may look at it differently in the future. And here's the thing, that I'm not one of those guys that like will refuse to change his mind. Like I always am evolving and taking in new information. My perspective changes sometimes. Like I may just feel differently about the game in 5 years, but that's where I stand as of right now. Hey, Jason, love the show. Could you explain how much the mechanics of a jump shot means to your success as a shooter? For example, Sean Marion had a very unorthodox shooting form, but still wasn't a terrible shooter. How much do you think a quick release helps a player? It's obviously been pivotal for Curry to have such a quick release. How much do you think Ant or Luka's shot could improve if they had quicker releases, lower set points? First of all, the mechanics. To me, it's way less about your release and way more about, can you do the exact same thing every single time? The two primary things that I look at with shooting is, one, a lack of wasted movement, and two, repeating the same exact form every single time. And what I mean by lack of wasted movement are like hitches, whether that's a hitch in your lower half, a hitch in your upper half, whatever it is, where like you just waste movement on your way up. That's why I practice a lot on like no dip shooting and like bad pass shooting, where like the ball comes at a different angle and you go straight into your shooting pocket from a different angle. I try to start every shot from up high because that allows me to have less wasted movement. Also, if I can repeat the exact same motion every time, it doesn't matter if I shoot like that. Like if I can do the exact same thing every time, it'll go in. And that's kind of the Sean Marion case, right? Who was a guy who could be a good shooter, right? And had seasons in his career where he shot the ball really well. So that's the mechanic side of it. On the release side of it, like a quicker release obviously is a huge advantage. The thing is like a lot of the bigger players out there just haven't needed to have a quick release. And so they're able to kind of have success with a slower release. But like, to me, a quicker release is always going to be an advantage just because it gives you the ability to get the shot off in shorter windows. Another big part of it too is a guy like Curry lives and breathes with his jump shot. You know, a lot of other guys like a LeBron, for instance, like that's just kind of more of a counter in his game, right? And so for him, it's not something that he probably has devoted nearly as much time to. Well, clearly hasn't devoted nearly as much time to. 5 more. What can the Pacers do to have a better defense? So first of all, Tyrese Haliburton and Ben Mathurin are both really, really bad perimeter defenders. I think Aaron Nesmith being out has really hurt them, although he did come back in the Pelicans game, although that Pelicans game, they just ran into a buzzsaw. Here's the thing. When you lose Bruce Brown in a trade, and then you also lose Aaron Nesmith to injury, Andrew Nembhard is like your best perimeter defender, and that's just not going to get the job done. From there, constructing it is really simple. You have the front line, right? You have a good rim protector in Miles Turner, who's actually pretty solid in switches too, and you have Pascal Siakam as that big forward that can be your low man help defender and a guy who can clean up the defensive glass. From there, if you have a good point of attack defender in there somewhere, someone like an Aaron Nesmith, or if they can upgrade that at some point, or if Ben Mathurin can become that guy, then it's about your other two guys in that backcourt just being able to do their jobs. So for a guy like Tyrese Haliburton, for instance, it would be competing in hedge and recover situations. So like hedging so that you don't, so that the guy can't turn the corner, and then sprinting back to chase a shooter, helping, defensive rebounding, all those different things. If you can craft smaller roles for them with a good perimeter defender and with Siakam and Turner anchoring things, those guys can do a good job in their smaller defensive roles. That's kind of like the pathway towards constructing a better defense for them. Next question. I wish there was another way to see your video analysis because I haven't used Twitter in like 10 years. So here's the thing. Why do I always point you guys to Twitter? That's where I originally built up my platform. So as a result, like I have the majority of my followers are there, right? So like my Instagram account, for instance, only has like 3,700 followers, but I don't even know how much on Twitter, but I have a lot more on Twitter. right? So like on Twitter, that's where I put out most of my like in between show content, just because that's where most of my audience is. That's where I do my film threads, but I am aware of the fact that like more people want to see more video stuff. So I'm actually working on that at the moment. I have a couple of different things in mind. We might try to produce it into the YouTube show again, and it just gets a little tricky with like with like getting flagged by YouTube for using NBA footage, and it's just always like a risk, because if they flag you a few times, all of a sudden you can't monetize anymore, so it gets a little tricky. But another thing I'm thinking I'm going to try, and probably try in the next week, is something called Watch Playback, or I think it's actually now just called Playback. But it's an opportunity that allows me to actually put my Synergy feed on the screen, and then I can literally go through game film on the screen in like almost like a stream that you guys can jump on. It kind of has like a little bit of like a Twitch vibe. So I'm going to be trying that in the next week. I'll shout it out on Twitter though. So like try to get on Twitter, at least for the announcement portion of it. And then I will point you guys towards Playback, and then you guys will be able to see my film sessions there. Next question. Feel you, Jason. I played basketball myself and also sprained my ankles maybe 7 or 8 times in total. I never want to watch basketball injuries because I know how painful they are. The difference being that these people are playing on their ankles maybe a week or two later. It took me about a month to even walk properly. So I used to have, when I first got out of college, I broke my foot my second year in college, but other than that, I did pretty well with injuries. But when I got out of college, like 3 consecutive years in a row, I had like one really bad ankle injury, and all 3 times I was out for like 3 weeks, like you're talking about. But what actually put me onto this new thing was Conor McGregor's trainer. I saw some video of Conor McGregor's trainer doing these like gnarly ankle flexibility exercises that made it so that like he could withstand ankle sprains. And so I started every single day literally twisting the hell out of my ankle in both directions 3 ways. So like I'd literally get up on my toe and I'd roll it like as hard as I can without being in like severe pain 3 times both ways. And now ever since then, even when I do tweak my ankle, I'm able to usually get right back up and play on it. So like, I don't know what it is about that exercise, but it just kind of builds like an additional layer of like flexibility and pliability in your ankle tendons and makes it so that when you sprain your ankle, it's not an issue. I haven't missed a significant, knock on wood, I haven't missed a significant chunk of time with an ankle injury. And I'm talking about even a couple of days. I haven't missed a couple of days with an ankle injury since I started doing that exercise. Now, hopefully nothing bad happens after I just jinx myself. But that is just a simple exercise that I would recommend to people. Next question. I appreciate you talking about your playing career. I felt the underlying tinge of being ass at ball during high school, LOL. Also, never knew you were a giant, 6'6". Oh nah, but yeah, man, love and appreciate what you do. Here's my question. You said you had a consistent shooting routine, and with me being a young adult, I'm getting more into basketball, and I wonder if there's a burnout when it comes to shooting. When I shoot a lot, my wrist literally starts to hurt, not in a good way, more in a I could injure my wrist kind of way. So yeah, there is like a built-in limit with the human body when it comes to shooting, or does pushing through it help in the long run? My bad with the essay long question. No worries at all. I just appreciate you supporting the show and interacting with us. So here's the thing. I do an obnoxious amount of shooting, obviously. I had an injury, though, related to overuse. This was actually when I was in Charlotte. This was in 2017. The story behind this is crazy. I was playing in a league there in town. Charlotte had such an awesome basketball community. I was playing in like 3 different leagues a week. Every pickup run had like a half dozen dudes who played professionally overseas, either in the past or currently. Like it was just so much fun. And we were in a championship game. And ironically, this was a great example of one of those ankle sprains. I sprained my ankle in the game, and it was in the championship game. Sprained my ankle in the game and was able to come back and play just like more or less fine. And it was tie game with like 5 seconds left, and I just hit a dribble combination into a pull-up 3 and hit it, and we won the championship. And I was super stoked, and obviously at this point in time, I was still trying to play professionally overseas too. So like I was like fulfilled because I felt like this like, oh my gosh, my hard work is paying off. Like this is so cool. I literally woke up the next morning and I couldn't extend my right elbow all the way. And it was weird because I didn't feel any pain during the game the previous day in my elbow. So I'm like, that's weird. So I go up to the gym to do my usual shooting routine. And I start my shooting routine by going around the world. So I start on the block and I make a shot at the block, and then I make a shot at the next block and the next block and the next block, then the elbow. Then I make 5 free throws. Then I go into my routine. That's just how I kind of like warm up. It's kind of like form shooting, basically, right? I go to do my form shooting and I can't. like I stand at the block and I go to shoot once and it's just this horrible pain and I like can't shoot. And so my buddy is a doctor. Those of you guys who follow my other podcast, Two Sons podcast, that one the buddy that I record with is a doctor. So I asked him, I'm like, what's going on? He's like, dude, you have tennis elbow. So like tennis elbow is basically like an inflammation of that tendon in your elbow. And so I ended up having to wear like this gnarly brace. And I periodically deal with inflammation in that area, although I've learned how to deal with it. But like that's the one injury I've had that I think is effectively burnout when it comes to shooting. But with that kind of stuff, it's just ice and ibuprofen to treat the inflammation. And like honestly, it should be fine. Like your body should be able to withstand high volume shooting. Last question. Love the show. Is there TV footage of when you played college basketball? So I played at a small school, an NAIA school in Phoenix that had less than 1,000 students. Now we were a really good basketball team. Like we beat a Division I while I was there, and we like were top 5 in the nation for NAIA most of the season. We ended up actually the team that won the national title that year. During the regular season, we went to their place and beat them soundly. Like we were a really good NAIA team. But like, obviously we weren't on television. So like I have, if you go to my Twitter feed at _JasonLT in my pinned tweet, I have like a 2.5 minute long video. That's like a compilation of like footage of me playing in college, footage of me playing in JUCO, footage of me playing in showcases, footage of me playing pickup. You can find that stuff there. That'll give you just a general idea of what I look like as a basketball player.